Hey guys, it's Khalid from Fat Guy Skinny Wallet, and I told you that I would try to do more updates that talk more about our finances, since people always ask what the Skinny Wallet part of my name is about. And like I've said in previous videos, and I talk about it more on my website, fatguyskinnywallet.com, link below, that I'm trying to pay off debt, that between student loans, credit cards, car, and other things, I have about $100,000 in debt, and trying to pay that off, especially since I have a side business where I help people to set up budgets and get out of debt. So I need to make sure that I'm doing this myself. So anyway, I'll incorporate some of those videos from time to time, and here is one, just talking about some car troubles that I dealt with recently. And it's been since, I think, my birthday, which is November 26th. I actually spent my birthday sitting in the mechanic's office because my car began to overheat, and you know, there was antifreeze in it, so I didn't know what else was going on. Maybe it was the thermostat, who knows, I'm not a mechanic. So took it in, and they found gunk, I would say, inside the coolant system. Seems like some of the coolant had gotten very, very, very thick. I mean, thick like where you could just wipe your hand in the top of the radiator and you can pull it out and see it on your fingers. So it had gotten really bad. It cost about $1,300 to take care of that, because the heater core got clogged up and they had to replace the heater core, and then they also had to flush it. They had to replace the water pump, and they had to replace the hoses and pretty much all the parts of the coolant system except the radiator. They tried to save the radiator because that's an expensive part. So took it back up there because it started overheating again, and they found out that there was, I believe at that time they said there was air in the system. So it seemed like that the person who did the job maybe didn't bleed it properly when he did it, which, you know, was fine in one sense. In another sense, it was frustrating because we had to drive it all the way up there. My mechanic is about 45 minutes away from me. I've been going to him for the last 17 years. The guy that I trust is a manager, so there's usually other people who are actually fixing the cars, but he oversees everything. So they then saw other problems. You know, it started overheating again about a week later. They saw that the thermostat that they had initially replaced was bad, so they replaced that for free, of course. Bled it, drove it up and down the highway for a while. It seemed to be fine. Then they, you know, gave it back to me, or probably my wife that time, went up and got it.'t it again for about a week and a half, put a couple 100 miles on it, and then same problem, it's overheating. And so with those problems, you know, getting a little frustrated, but took it back up to them, called them, took it back up, and they said, hey, it's air in the system again. So we'll bleed it, drive it like crazy, and see what's going on. We know that he bled it before, and you know, they let it run for a long time, trying to make sure that there was nothing wrong with it. And then he says, you know, there may be a crack somewhere in the system that's allowing air to come in, because there is no air in the system when you drive off of our property, but then a week later there's air in the system, so there must be some type of crack. If it happens again, then we'll specifically just look for a crack in the system rather than looking for, you know, hoses that are worn because we just replaced the hoses, or a broken thermostat, or things like that are a typical problem. In between all of that, we took it up again, and I think probably like the third time, they discovered that all that gunk that they tried to flush out had gotten into the radiator. So it looks like, you know, we didn't catch it soon enough. So that was $300. He said, you know, you've been driving up here a lot, burning gas, you've been spending time, you spent a lot of money so far. So you know what, just pay for the part, and we'll do the labor for free. That's it, just buy the part. So they did that, which I was very grateful for, and so up to this point, I had spent $1,600 and probably a few tanks of gas and wear and tear on both of our vehicles driving up there, and spent a few Saturdays sitting there waiting, and my wife spent hours waiting as well, different times. So, dealing with that, $1,600 that we didn't have because we're trying to pay off debt. Fortunately, we had an emergency fund And we also, about last year, I think we got a credit card specifically for car expenses, since they can come up at any time and they can be so costly, that allows us to take 6 months to pay off any car expense as long as it's over $300, and with no interest. So it's like essentially we get an interest-free loan to pay for car repairs, which is great. So we've used that, and then are going to try to pay it off, and then use our emergency savings to finish paying it in the end of month 5, essentially. So I'll just let you know where that is, $1,600. So about 2 weeks ago, it started overheating again after all of that, right? You know, he actually called me, and he said, like, the day it started overheating, it overheated one day. The day after, he called me, and he said, are you still having problems? The reason why I ask is my car is a 05. He said because someone brought in a 04 model with the same exact engine, and they had the same problems with it overheating, and there being air in the system, and there not being anything wrong. He didn't have the gunk that I had, which I don't know, could have came from all the air coming in the system, and, you know, the oxygen, you know, overwhelming amount of oxygen mixing with the antifreeze. I don't know. But anyway, he didn't have the gunk problem. So they didn't have to replace the heating core and the radiator and flush out the system and replace the water pump and those things for this person. So he began to research online, and one of his other mechanics said, hey, I had the same exact problem with my mother's friend's car, and I had to replace the intake manifold gasket because it was leaking. And it was, you know, that's where air was coming in. And it was a very slow, small leak, which is why when you look in the system, the antifreeze is there because it's such a small leak. But it's enough to let air in at a pretty quick rate, as far as the system is concerned. So he looked online, saw that it was a really common problem. That apparently GE knows that these Chevy Impalas, you know, the mid-2000s, you know, with those particular engines, because of how they built the system, they have these problems. That they use a plastic part that wears pretty easily because of the movement of the metal, because, you know, the engine and the various parts heat up to high degrees, and then they cool down. And in doing that, they expand and contract. And so putting this plastic piece on, it wears at the expansion and contraction. Now it's minor, so it doesn't happen for years down the road. So since it won't happen until you're out of warranty, they don't care, and it's not a real safety issue, so they're not required to do anything about it. It's not like the time when one of these companies had brakes that were wearing, and another time I think Firestone had tires that were blowing out. So those are safety hazards. Your car overheating, when it overheats, you pull over. It's not like it's something where your brakes just malfunction. So they're not required to fix it. So we took it up there. They ran it for a day. They ran it, let it cool down for like an hour. They kept it in the bay and just kept doing it all day. I actually wrote, and I'm going to post links to the articles below because I wrote in much more detail. And while I was sitting in the mechanic's office, I actually wrote up exactly what was going on so you can see what was happening. But anyway, driving, and then they would let it cool down. You know, drive it some, let it cool down, and just to try to see if they could see it leaking. So ambulance is coming from somewhere, and I can't see him right now. Don't you just hate that? All right, now I see him. So I'm gonna pause this for a minute. All right, ambulance is going now. So they weren't able to see the crack. So my wife came and picked me up, and we said, you know, let it go overnight. Let's keep it and then start driving it in the morning. Because he said, you know, we don't want to do a $700 procedure. Yeah, that's how much it would cost. They had to take apart the engine. So he said, we don't want to do a $700 procedure off of a guess. So we want to make sure that we see the leaks. And then what he showed me was that there was rust right where the other person's car was leaking. He said, we don't see the actual leak, but we can see this rust, and you can see the rust coming down. Obviously, it leaked at some point. It leaked, and it leaked enough to cause a rust stain that was in the shape of liquid leaking. So anyway, they do that the next day, and he says, we don't see it, but I'm pretty sure that's where it is, because when you go online, you see that's the common problem, and it said you see the signs of leaking. So I said, okay, let's just do it. And then he called the other person who had gotten their car fixed like a little more than a week ago, at that point, a week earlier, and asked them, are you having any problems? They said, no, it completely fixed it. I'm not having the problems anymore. Well, of it overheating. Let's do it. So that's another $700. So now I spent $2,300 to fix this car. So he even called me a little over a week ago just to check and make sure everything was all right, which is great. Like I said, I love this guy. He, I'll try to be loyal to him in the shop because, I really trust him, and he has definitely given me breaks over the years, and, he's a very fair, honest guy, and he's extremely knowledgeable. The only problem is that he usually isn't the one working on the car because he manages the shop. So there's one mechanic that I really trust, and there's two other guys keep getting swapped, over the years. There have been different guys in there, so I really don't know the other guys enough to say I trust them. So it's good. But this time he put the superstar mechanic on it, and he was going out and checking often. So they were working together on it, really. So I felt good about that. So told him, hey, everything's fine. It seems to have fixed the problem. I'll call you if it overheats again. Driving to work yesterday, and it overheats. Now I said, you know what? This could be a fluke. It can be a fluke. It could be happening one time, it just overheats and we'll never see it overheat again. Well, it went about 4 or 5 more times. And it took me about an hour to get to work, where it normally takes about 20 minutes because I had to pull over on several highways because the car started overheating. Fortunately, it hasn't overheated today as I'm driving to work. But the fact that it goes through these cycles where it overheats and then it's fine. Now, when it overheats, he actually thought it was the gauge one time, because I was driving, and say this is the halfway mark, where the temperature is about 210, let's say, something like that. Here. It'll be here, so it'll indicate that the temperature is approximately 180. Then within 10 seconds or less, it jumps up to the 260 mark, and then the lights come on and the bells start to go to let you know, hey, it's overheating. It's pretty drastic right now. And that's as far as it goes, so it could go up to 300 or more. Then you can hit a pocket, and that's what makes you think that sometimes it could be the gauge, and it drops down and it just comes back down and says, hey, I'm about 200. Now, I don't know too much metal that can, in a closed system, drop from almost 300 to 200 in a matter of 4 or 5 seconds. But they tested it out. It actually overheated once when my wife was driving it, and she took it to a local mechanic. Now this one is the franchise. This one that we go to. It's not like a Pep Boys or anything. It's a local one. So it has different owners, but there's about 12 in the state. So our mechanic called the guy who's local, and told my wife to take it there, and they looked at it right away, and he told them what they had already done to it, so they would know what things that they didn't have to look for. So they wouldn't waste their time and then charge us for labor, which was great. So, they just looked, and they couldn't get it to overheat while it was there, but it was overheating while she drove there. So that's kind of frustrating, but the fact that it's cyclical like that can point to the gauge, but it can also point to something like air in the system, or a thermostat that's opening sometimes and sometimes not opening when it needs to. So you get this kind of buildup, and then you get the heat, and then when the fluid releases, it can go through the system and cool it down. Then you get, and it cools down relatively quickly. I don't know. I'm not a mechanic. I work in finance. I was trained in economics, so I'm not a mechanic. But I could just tell you that it's extremely frustrating. And spending $2,300 on a car, and while I'm driving to work yesterday, it overheated again. That was extremely frustrating. So, anyway, just letting you know where I am. Our finances, trying to pay off debt. It's kind of in a little, I won't say turmoil, that's a strong word, but it's in kind of a flux right now because we have these unexpected expenses that have come up and on things that we thought that we dealt with already. What makes matters worse is that we have about 2 or 3 payments left on the car. We owe less than $500 on the car. So it's essentially paid off. So that makes it worse and better. I mean, I'm glad that we don't owe $8,000 to $10,000 on a car that constantly overheats. And there's other problems to the car. I don't have a speedometer. So right now it's telling me I'm going 3 miles an hour. I've gotten pretty good at judging my speed just by driving. Yes, Tina, I've gotten good at it. But I'm going about 34, 35 miles an hour right now. And it's telling me that I'm going about 4. So, yeah, that's a big problem. And on top of the speedometer hasn't been working for years. It stopped working. The rear defrost is no longer working. So I have some electrical problem. It keeps telling me that the anti-lock brakes and the traction system isn't working, even though it is. I had my mechanic check that out. And more recently, the gas gauge has stopped working. So right now, I'm somewhere on the bottom where E is here. I'm here. So, yeah, it's telling me that my gas is so far beyond empty that I shouldn't be moving right now. So those 2 things have stopped working. Said the other problem, all these other electrical problems have come up. So that's what they said, hey, it could be the gauge itself. So I don't know. We'll see how long the gauge lasts. Now, if the gauge goes, it's going to be kind of difficult to keep the car because I'm going to have to stop every single time the gauge tells me it overheats because it could be real and I don't want my engine seizing up. So, you know, we'll see how that goes, and of course I'll update you guys on the car. It's already been 17 minutes because this has gone on forever and it's been so frustrating. So if you're still here at the end of this, then you deserve some type of reward because I'm driving and sitting here just talking about my car. So if you have, thank you. Even if you had to cut out early, you probably aren't hearing this unless you skip to the end. You know, thank you. And I try to give you more updates on little things going on with our finances, and pretty soon I'll be sharing how we actually set up a budget, what tools we use, and what things we use in order to set priorities on what things to pay off and what things to cut out of our lives, and also ways that we try to increase our income. Alright guys, so thanks for staying tuned, and I'll see you guys next time. Oh, if you're watching this, don't forget, today is Tuesday, the 19th of February. Tonight will be the premiere of the Renew Show, where me, Julie Wilson, and Rob Reno will be sharing our background, sharing our stories, sharing our vision for the show, and what we hope to get out of the show, and what we hope to give back to the community through the show. So, hopefully you guys can see us there. There's a link to the Renew Show that's below. So hopefully you guys can make it tonight. If not, the live show will be recorded and posted on the Renew Show channel, so you'll be able to see it there. Alright guys, till the next time.